Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dyslexia Life Hacks show. I'm your host, Matthew Head. And in this episode, I've got Handy Spelling on, who is Maggie Souter and Sally Ashcroft. Handy Spelling is a stationery system as well as training resources that uses images to help people learn how to spell and their grammar. Sally teaches spelling as well as coaches teachers, while Maggie teaches communication design. I will put links to Handy Spelling and other things we talk about in the show notes, which will be available at dyslexialifehacks.com/podcast. Welcome to the show, the two of you.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for having us.
No problem at all. I thought I'd start off really at the beginning. And how did the two of you meet?
Well, as mothers of dyslexic boys, standing at the gate when they're 11, slightly worried, sharing our woes.
So did both your children are similar age and got statement of dyslexia at the same time?
Yeah, exactly. We both have 3 children. It was the youngest in each case that brought us together. But I've got 2 older ones who are also dyslexic. So I was awash with dyslexia.
You had the full set by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
So Maggie, you say all 3 of your kids are dyslexic. How are you finding the 3 of them? Are they all the same? Obviously not the same age, but how are they treating dyslexia differently as they walk through their lives?
Very different. I mean, the eldest is, he's now 28. He was the person in school who was always chatty. I was told parent meetings were always a bit of a nightmare because he didn't concentrate, he didn't this, he didn't that. Very articulate. And not obviously dyslexic, actually. He learned to read quite quickly. His spelling was really good. But it was only actually for him because I didn't know anything about it. There isn't dyslexia on my side of the family. So when it came to GCSEs for him, he got kind of very average grades. And it was only when he went to sixth form, he went to a different school actually, and they thought, what's going on here with this guy? And they assessed him and there he was. He was dyslexic. So only really for him, worked out when he was 17. He works in the creative industry. He is a very ideas-based visual person. So his skills are very suited to what he does. And it's worked out brilliantly for him, to be honest. The middle one is very traditional kind of dyslexic, struggled at school from a very, very early age. Well, actually, he didn't crawl. He struggled to speak. He didn't meet those kind of at 2, you should be saying this many words. So that I was sort of, thinking what's going on here. I was told there was probably something wrong with his hearing when he was 3. And it was actually his processing at 6.5. I think he was assessed as dyslexic. And then it sort of, went from there. He actually went on to study history and did manage to get first, which was, he's got that dyslexia resilience, where he just works hard and just keeps going. And for him, I would say that you can just see that dyslexia is for life, actually. There's that whole thing, which is great right now, where everyone's talking about your superpower, which is all kind of good. But actually, the reality for him in the classroom was it didn't feel like a superpower. It affected his self-esteem. It felt the exact opposite. And I suppose it's the thing that kind of, it's the thinking behind handy spelling, which is to be able to give kids something that's quiet but supportive, that doesn't make a big show. It's something that you can hold in your hand, that you can, just so that you need that little prompt. Anyway, so he's, for me, I would say typically dyslexic. And then the younger one is dyslexic and dyspraxic. Woo! And
just to throw a slight curveball in at the end.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's been really interesting journey.
Did you start noticing dyslexic traits in the younger 2 after you knew the eldest?
No. It's more because there's only 3 years between the first and second. So it was more that the bells were ringing on the second one. Because he was obviously, he couldn't read, he couldn't this, he couldn't that. So it was more kind of obvious there. And off the back of it, because I didn't know anything, I just kind of went and did the Hornsby course, which was run by Dyslexia Action. To kind of, my intention was actually just to find out what this is and how do I work with them, because they were always given extra stuff to do, like this kind of load of work. And how do you make it manageable? How do you make it interesting? How do you make it memorable? And off the back of that, I was able to do some one-to-one teaching. So I used to work with dyslexic kids in a local school, but I also, because I teach communication design to degree students, there's a kind of crossover with making things memorable, hopefully, communicating something clearly. So the skills that I used in that part of my life, I kind of tied them into dyslexia. So there you go.
I've got a vision of the two of you stood outside school gates, leaves blowing around. How the hell did you
It would be September.
Yeah. I don't know why. That's what school gates look like to me in my brain. Black fence and all that kind of stuff. How did the two of you work out? Like, you just stood there comparing notes one day and they're like, mine does that, or or you both stood there after school realising you're picking your children up later because they're at some extra dyslexia thing. I'm just curious how you managed to work it out that both your children were dyslexic.
To be honest, I had actually heard of Sally.
You're infamous there, Sally, clearly.
Because Sally is a renowned dyslexia tutor. And because I'd started to work in this local school with these dyslexic children, I know a lot of them had a tuition outside school. And I knew it was Sally Ashcroft. I'd heard, so-and-so's going to Sally Ashcroft.
Did I know that?
Yeah. So-and-so's going to Sally Ashcroft. So when we first started talking, you said you were Sally. And I knew from our sons that the surname was Ashcroft. So I sort of went, this world is small.
I remember that Maggie told me our kids got on really well, and so we sort of had the odd coffee and stuff. And I remember Maggie saying to me that she'd been on a trip somewhere, and I probably should remember where, and she'd had a really lovely day at a pencil museum. And I thought, hello, she's a woman after my own heart, because
of your interest.
Yeah. And so I think it's sort of, it was a bit of one of those organic things that I have felt for a long time, that it takes such a long time to teach children the top 80, then 160, then 240 high frequency words. And if the child's not quite ready, because they can't hear the letters in the word, because English is such a strange, awful language, they can just carry on misspelling things for quite a long time. And it's really obvious to their friends, who then, because they don't really think what's going on, not with any meanness in mind, might go, how can you possibly have spelled here wrong, or once upon a time, how can you spell that stuff wrong? And then the children that I was working with, they then want to write very little, because they see writing as this very exposing thing where any minute now they might have spelt something wrong and make themselves very obvious to other people. And they don't know which one it is, because they look at it and go, it looks okay to me, not sure. And so, we thought that one of the very basic things we could do was, as Maggie said earlier, in a very subtle way, just design some really fun illustrated stationery that they would have anyway. Nobody would really know. Apart from it's all in alphabetical order. They can just, in their hand, just look up and go, oh God, that's how you spell upon. It's it's a U instead of an A, which everybody always puts. And of course, then you also have like the B's and D's, which it's a very classic thing, but it is something that bugs people at early ages of literacy as well. So we had quite a lot of fun, actually. We were thinking about, shoe, what were they called, Maggie? Insoles at one point we were going to do. And then we had a summer camp, and we were looking at, the kids love those sort of tattoos, that semi-permanent tattoos, or not, yes. Whatever, what do you call them, like impermanent tattoos or something. So we actually, for a couple of years, with our knowledge of working with dyslexia children, we thought of how could we help this kid? And then we made prototypes and used them in the lessons to see how the children would get on with them, and the feedback was just like one of like relief. I can't remember those words, but I can just find it really easily. So that it was quite a long process, actually, wasn't it, Maggie? We didn't.
Yeah.
We just sort of did it bit by bit. I mean, and tested it and tested the colours, and we believe very much in structure. That really helps dyslexic children, rather than the sort of crazy, colourful. That's cool, but not actually for learning. I think that just creates more confusion. So we just wanted to be very systematic and very simple, and just really hone down what was needed for those early years. So yeah, it was something that seemed like a glaringly obvious hole in the market, to be honest. And we were really worried that everybody was going to copy us, because children write every day and need notebooks and all of the rulers and all the other stuff that we do. And dyslexic children really, I mean, Maggie's idea was the ruler with the days of the week and the months of the year. I mean, they have to do that every single day, probably multiple times on every single day. And, as the mother of a dyslexic boy, I was really sad. I mean, lots of dyslexic parents are a bit more able to deal with it, but I just hated the idea of him being in class and spelling Tuesday wrong, or Wednesday, Monday, all of these days wrong every day, and putting it at the top of his page and all of his friends seeing that. I just wondered what it would lead to. I didn't want him to be mocked, and I didn't want him to be feeling like he was different because he missed out, an E in Tuesday. It as adults, it's not, spelling's not important nowadays. We can use spell check and God knows what else. But I think in the classroom, it still remains like a really clear division of those who can spell and who can't.
I think it's one of the few things that you will have marks on your spelling in other subjects, where you don't have marks on your ability of other subjects in your English lessons. It's kind of telling how much weight to put on it. Obviously, you're mentioning handy spelling there with designing all the pens and pencils and stuff. I'm interested in that. I kind of want to park handy spelling for a minute and just come back to your sort of background before you dive into that. So apparently you're infamous, Sally, as being a dyslexic tutor. How did that kick off, first of all?
The same really as loads of parents. My son was diagnosed, my youngest son actually was diagnosed. My mum and dad are both dyslexic, my sister's dyslexic, so I had actually been very aware of dyslexia my whole life. I remember, back in the 70s, my sister was one of the test case for the first educational psychologist report. And in those days, they were like 3 tomes, or in my imagination anyway, they were 3 tomes thick. And my mum, I remember she took it into our rather sort of snooty headmaster, and she said, "Oh, look, this explains my daughter's learning," and he threw it back at her, and he said, "In my day, we called it bone idle." And I just remember my mum and my being really, really devastated by it. And I had to do my sister's homework, and, I had to really help her the whole time, because nobody made any allowances. Nobody recognized any, she's smarter than I am, but she just couldn't spell. And so I ended up just stepping in. So basically I was always really interested. And then when my own son was diagnosed, like lots of parents, I did as many courses as I could. And I really loved the course. And I was lucky enough to be invited to do the masters. And then I just happened to choose spelling because I thought that was a little bit undercooked as a subject. And that thing, well, in terms of how to teach spelling, it's there's quite a lot of academic knowledge about why people spell wrong and the morphology, but how to make spelling memorable was something that is still not brilliantly systemized, if you like. And I just happened to do that for my thesis, and that went down quite well. And so I made, given that my spelling's not the best, I thought I would try and make spelling rules as funky as possible. And so did that in some clubs and taught teachers how to make it a bit more, less dry and create characters related to the different spelling rules and things like that. And then that led me very, very seamlessly into handy spelling, making it interesting and understandable.
Yes, because obviously for the benefit of audio, handy spelling has quite a lot of stationery. You have your character handy, which looks like basically a white gloved hand. It reminds me of Sonic the Hedgehog's hands, if that was any of the design inspiration.
You have to ask the designer. That's not my generation, but possibly.
Because I guess with the communication design background, Maggie, that was kind of would that been your idea with the graphics that go along with the words?
Yeah, it was a pretty organic process. We talked it through a lot. I suppose I refined it and developed it. Yeah, I mean, I was originally a graphic designer. Then I worked as an art director in advertising. So, I've been trained in making it sticky, make it, about your target audience. It's about how do you get them and where do you put the information so that it's memorable. So, and that tied in with just that kind of whole idea of trying to help those kids. I just, you know how it is. I don't know how, you're at school and you're put on the different table.
Yep.
It's all of that stuff, that kind of feeling of other. And if you can have something that just like it's a little quiet, it's like having your mum in your pencil case just to sort of say, look, here you go. It's spell it like that. This is how it is, just so that little bit of support, and I don't know. I tell you what, if handy, I know you don't want to hear about handy spelling all the time, but if it had been around when my kids were going through it, I would have just loved it because I just feel that, anyway, so a background in communication design is very useful, and it's just about bringing information to an audience in a place where they can access it.
And how are you finding the response to it? Because I quite like Handy's obviously doing the right action for whatever word it is. I was looking at it, and there's one called witch, and it's the witch that flies around on a broomstick. It's from Wicked, and it's got wearing the witch's hat. And I remember a teacher, how I learned which witch is which is easiest to say really, is that they drew the hat on the T, and the one with the T is that type of witch. Yeah. Are you finding that they are using the stationery and almost doing a look and copy thing, or are they slowly after a while retaining the image and then visually sort of, how can I put this? They've almost got an image in their head of the action that Handy's doing and the word, and they can spell it without, even if they're holding a regular piece of stationery?
Well, I think the images really help with the understanding of the homophone words particularly. So, I think kids get quite confused which spelling. I mean, they absolutely, as we know, dyslexic children are as smart as any other children. They absolutely get the idea of homophones. What they don't get is which spelling goes with which one of them. And so I think initially it's actually they are just looking, and you have this sort of repetition of getting it right. And after so many repetitions, rather than what you're explaining there about, that image will suggest to them this picture. But I mean, different children respond in different ways. Something that happens almost on a daily basis with me is that a smart, imaginative child who really likes creating stories or characters, or, they don't want to write. And not writing is such it really slows you down. You miss a lot of learning opportunities if you don't write, make all those mistakes that, make mistakes with syntax, mistakes with grammar and all of that stuff, that you have to make those mistakes in order to progress. And if your overriding ambition is to write as little as possible so you can't spell anything wrong.
I used to have that ambition. Yeah.
Yes, I know. I mean, I've seen kids who you ask them to talk about their dog and they go off on this amazing, description of their dog. And then you write it down and it's, my dog is nice. And,
it is black with a waggly tail. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I think that having support, whether it's something a teacher might put on your table or seat you on a wall where there's a big bank of words, or having something from us or from somebody else that helps you with the vocabulary that you need, is going some way towards encouraging the child to put into on the page what they can put into words. It worries me a great deal when children stop writing, and I have to say it happens far too regularly, which was one of the main kickers for us to do this. We really wanted to help other children and whose parents were perhaps, we were lucky because we were both, they were our third kids. We'd been through the system. We knew what was coming. But you talk to parents who have just found out their first child is dyslexic, and it's an absolute sort of, well, I nearly swore then, but it's a really bad place to be in, because they feel like they should do so much all the time. They don't know what to prioritize, and what works, what doesn't work, and what the stress then gets put onto the child as well oftentimes. So simple little hacks, sorry, beg the pun, but are really, really important, because this is a journey.
I could see I'm always visualising they've got a pencil case stuffed there with all the pencils stuffed in the top, and they just keep yanking them out to have a look. Which one is it this time? How did you come about all the graphics? Did you just end up testing a load? Because they're really I quite like them. They really explain what the word means in a very simple kind of way. And it's that, because I'm a geeky designer, really, I want to know how the design process come around for them and how you managed to refine it down to the ones you've got.
We have a brilliant illustrator called Amy Gallagher, and I would suggest what it could be, and she would quite often draw what I suggested and 2 or 3 others, and then we would just select from that, really, whatever. Well, I think humour was important.
Yes,
something that was humorous, that the kids would, the right sort of tone, something that would attract their attention. If you make something humorous, it becomes, people are interacting with it, so you remember it more. So, that was always a kind of a goal, just to keep it light and to keep it fun, but also, practical, actually. Yeah.
Did you do much testing to see which kind of graphics worked better?
We were lucky because, I teach dyslexic children every day of the week. So we have our homegrown testing crowd that we can work on. And so that was really helpful. Yeah. So we got good feedback, and that guided us a lot. But actually, to be honest, I think our instincts were quite good. I don't think we had to change anything in the end, did we? Everybody was fine.
There was some prototype. When we were looking at the B's and D's, we went through.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Prototype pencil toppers and things like that. And I was sort of making these sort of one-off things and leave them. Sally would have them and try them with the kids. And we ended up moving from that into tattoos and stickers for B's and D's.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, you're right.
So what do you got? Would you say tattoos? What, you got stickers on the back of their hands for which?
Well,
the
stickers with for either left and right and B and D, and you can put them wherever you want. But there are also tattoos, which the thinking was, again, this kind of like subtle reminder that you could have a tattoo that will be on for 5 days or something, and then you wash it off. Yeah, and you can just put it. It was a B or a D, and we had a little image of a bee and an image of a D for a dog. So it was a kind of like a nice little picture, because tattoos are kind of all the rage anyway, aren't they? But these are ones that will wash off. You might not want your 8-year-old with a permanent bee on it. Anyway, it was just a little reminder, another visual reminder. Because one of my kids, when he was learning spelling, they did a whole thing in his class of they were doing a CH, they were learning a ch. And so the teacher was very inventive, actually made it very multisensory, and had melted some chocolate and had suggested that they put their fingers in it and draw CH on each other's foreheads, actually.
that is quite creative.
They had CH, and of course it's not lovely. I don't know, and they're licking their fingers, whatever. Yeah. But it was that sort of thinking. I was thinking, oh, well, if it's on them, if it stayed on a bit longer, then you might remember it.
Kids do it naturally anyway. Dyslexic children have spotted everything in any classroom that's going to help them. They are really alert. I mean, you probably remember those days. And, it's very, very clear to me, when I've been a Senko in a school and you sit at the back and you watch the child that you're there to observe, and you see exactly where their eye line is going at what point, and, the cues that they're taking. And I remember from my first, when I was doing my teacher training, my first dyslexic pupil, actually. I had to take him, they put us in the freezing cold loft, which was really nice and cozy.
Yeah, how helpful.
But, really cozy. But we went up into the loft and it was really cold, and he took his jumper off. And I thought, God, what's he taking his jumper off for? It's freezing up here. And then I'd asked him to spell his name, and his name is Sam. And he took his jumper off and he got his name that was on the back of his jumper. His name was Sam. It was pretty simple name, really. But, he knew that that's how he was not going to get his name wrong. And so, I think dyslexic kids are smart, they're ingenious, they're looking for support, and they'll find it in the classroom. They'll find it anywhere. So, let's put it where they don't have to hope that, some big guy with a big hairdo is not covering the words that they need for that day. Put it right in front of them.
Yeah, also I used to get told off for looking around the class as I'm finding the workaround of, I can see that sign out there. That's got one of the words I need on it. And it's, you just get told off for looking up.
That's really smart. That's really problem solving. But the teacher possibly doesn't realise what you're doing.
No, I don't think so. And I wouldn't necessarily tell them what I was doing either.
No, of course not.
Because you want to fit in, don't you? Which is kind of your sort of drive as well. Yeah. How are teachers with this? Because they're obviously in a classroom. I get the feeling you're aiming more at primary and early secondary school kids. Would that be your kind of demographic?
Yeah. Well, the teachers that I work with and have spoken to just love it. They absolutely love it, and they wish they had the budget to buy it for everybody. And they put posters up and things for us, which is very kind and supportive. I mean, I think any sort of Senko or anybody who has dealt properly, with dyslexic learners and know how the word some can drive them bonkers for 3 years, would love, that's just one of 240 that they actually have to nail, by the end of year 2, ideally, and sometimes go on to year 6. So, know that that's just, we don't, spelling's so not important, but it can have the most awful effect if you don't feel comfortable about it.
It can be devastating, can't it? You mocked T's on it, feel like you don't fit in. Yes. And that's one thing I wanted to get to was exams. So
you can't use our stuff in exams.
No, I was about to say you can't take a pencil case with stuff written on it in exams, can you?
No, sadly not.
But what's the prep for them to transition through from, if they've been using more of the time, so they're hitting their SATs and they've been using for 2-3 years.
Yeah.
How do you transition
after 2 or 3 years, they would know it anyway. They would know it. And we have sort of some teaching aids on the website that explain in hopefully quite a friendly and fun way some of the key rules that you need to get under your belt. So, by the time you have to sit your 11 plus, for example, you will know most of the words, if not all of the words that we put in front of you. The difficulty is, you might be able to spell something fine for 2 days of the week, and then you're a bit tired, or you're thinking about the handwriting or the grammar or the vocabulary or something else, and then your spelling goes out the window, Yep. So it's really unfair for dyslexic children to be marked down on spelling. And actually, in GCSEs now, they only used to penalise you a few marks if your spelling was dodgy, and that's doubled now, which is, shocking really for children with a dyslexia diagnosis, because that's feeding into the whole thing about, I better write less in case I spell it wrong. Well, in your GCSE English, who wants to encourage a child to write less? That's just
the big one example for me was my history exam.
Mm-hmm.
I, to this day, could tell you what happened in the Munich Putsch in Germany. I got a really poor grade in that exam because it's an essay-based exam.
Yeah.
So it is tricky with things like that. At university, by the time I got to university, late 20s, I was using scribes.
Yes.
So
did you? Right.
Yeah. And then you're getting told by the scribe to slow down because they can't keep up.
Infuriating. Okay. Yeah. Well, I would sort of encourage teenagers to transition to laptops. I think most do because the print, that when you bash the key, you're always going to get the same shape, and you have that visual constancy, which is really helpful. Whereas when you're writing, you can write things in a different way and you won't necessarily spot it, but the computer will spot it for you if you're using a laptop. So it is a bit easier, I think, and especially although it's very, very painful, if you can get your typing speed up to quicker than you can write, then you're onto a real winner and you won't look back. I
was to say the other thing with handwriting exams, probably to show my age, because we weren't allowed laptops in exams because they were huge, but over gripping the pen. So I ended up with arm fatigue after a while.
Okay. Yeah. I have to say that, with two of my sons, that they did not take the laptop option because they actually felt it affected their spelling. That kind of kinesthetic, that motion, that hand, that movement was what helped them remember how a word was formed. So for both of them, they chose to write their essays. And
interesting.
It's they're all different, aren't they?
They are all different, for sure.
Yeah, and it is, and there's quite a lot of things which overlap. As each dyslexic person is slightly different, and you probably find, as we've alluded to, with trying to look around the room to find words that spell. I imagine when you're putting your handy spelling in front of them, you find some really interesting ways that somebody's using it that you've never thought of, maybe.
Well, I think one of the nicest things we've done is the colouring in, the homophone mat, because, whenever you take your kid to Pizza Express or something, and they just get bored so quickly, or, if the pizza takes more than 4 seconds to arrive, they love the colouring. I mean, my kids always were like asking for the crayons and drawing and everything. And so we thought that would be something that, would really be a lovely project, because as you say, the handy thing is quite funny, the character, and you've got loads and loads of homophones, and it's sort of quite a little bit like the Where's Wally, what's going on here, what's going on there, and you can colour them all in yourself. So those have been really popular, particularly on holidays, for people taking on holidays. But I wish I'd have had that when I like Maggie, I've got 3 boys. They were always boisterous and noisy and couldn't wait very long for anything, and just to give them something that they could just get there and chat over, a bit of colouring. I mean, I just think it's so much better than being on screens at a dining table, to be honest, although I know that's the new way. But
screens and a set of AirPods.
Yeah, you just don't talk though, do you? Then the kids don't talk together. It's I don't know. I'm old-fashioned, but I sit at dining tables. I have a bit of a thing that, if you want your kids to speak, letting them onto a screen is not really the best way to do that.
No. Losing young children into even adults, the call of your phone is hard work. So just going over this homophone map, what's it look like? Is the colouring just something you can do that's fun with it, or does the colouring help learn the homophones?
Well, you can be a bit systematic about it, and there is on the website it tells you how you can use certain colours for certain things. But the main thing is just to have a lot of fun with it. It's already been organised for you in a way that similar patterns are together, but primarily it's making children, oh yes, peak, that's one of those words that I could trip up on because it's got two spellings. Or I mean, some of them were quite new to me, actually. I never thought of Prince like a Prince Charming and prints like your footprints being a homophone until we actually were,
of course
it's quite funny, isn't it? Which ones? I mean, a little bit, it depends on your accent, but I hope we've got the most. How many are there, Maggie? Is there
50?
50, yeah. I thought it was 50. Yeah.
I think one of the key things for kids to, in terms of making something memorable is to present it over and over again, but in a variety of ways. So, the fact that it's on a pencil is one way of interacting with it. The fact it's in a homophone colouring pad is another way of interacting with it. You can colour it in. And also, we've also have them on bookmarks, so it's like a little visual reminder in your book. So it's about putting it in a range of places and spaces so that it's being repeated, isn't it? It's that kind of building it up, getting it from short-term to long-term memory just by that kind of, oh, here it is again. Oh, it's like this now,
And parents can do that as well, much easier. I mean, you need our stuff sort of thing for school where parents can't get in there, and control the situation. But, at home, you can get those, I love those pens that restaurants use. You can buy them now and then write on the mirror in the bathroom.
Oh, you mean the chalk markers?
Exactly. Yes, and the foam in the bar. As Maggie says, it's the variety of ways of engaging students. You never know which one is going to kick in at which point. So I would really encourage parents to be as creative at home as possible. I still remember when my son said to me, "Mum, why is mechanic not mechanic if that's how he spells it?" And I was like, yes, something's sticking, even though it was quite hard to explain. I was like, yes, you're right. That should be a CH, and for a dyslexic child to look at some lorry and work out that mechanic was spelt strangely. I thought I'd done quite a good job in that instance.
Well, I always joke with people, I used to work as a mechanic and I work as an engineer, and I got a fancier job with an easier word to spell.
Yes, exactly.
Degree.
HDV technician. Why does technician look really wrong?
Yes, exactly. Parents can really play around with all of that stuff at home, to make those patterns stick out. Because otherwise, if you don't see it regularly, you are never, as a dyslexic person, going to just naturally work out that there's this sound in this word or this sound and that you can't hear it. It's mad.
No. Did you find something I used to do when I was younger? Like, I could commit certain words to short-term memory to get through whichever bit of the topic I need to get through that point. And then it went again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course, because we don't have a clear mapping of sound to letter in our language. So, that's definitely going to, if you're doing the Egyptians, you've got the Egyptians and the papyrus and all of those words. And then 3 days later, you don't need them anymore. And then that's gone. But yeah, I think that's very common, very, very common. To be honest with you, I always think it's absolutely amazing that anybody can look at our language, start reading, and then just know how to spell. I mean, how do people who are not dyslexic do that? It's such a strange language, isn't it? I mean, it's such a strange language. How do you just read it, see a word a few times, and then know when you happen to want to spell it a year later that it's got a T in it or whatever? I mean, it is unbelievable given the strangeness of our language.
Yeah, the old classic, look, cover, write, check. Like, people seem to be able to do that 3 times. And like, got it.
Yeah, it does not work for dyslexics at all.
No, not at all. And it's very condescending when somebody tells you to keep doing that.
Yeah. Yes. They still do that, Matt, today.
Yeah, I do.
That's still going on.
Yeah.
Infuriatingly, yeah.
Yeah, I just have a memory of a person in my class. She was trying to be really helpful, but it's just this. Don't you think I've done that lots of times already? Like, I haven't just not bothered.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it's a very difficult language. We don't have enough letters, and it's a very old language. We've been invaded lots of times. The Vikings have caused us quite a few problems. The French, Julius Caesar. So many. Historically, our language has been really messed around with, and then it doesn't spell like it sounds. That's for sure.
Yes. So if somebody's listening to this and wants to buy their children handy spelling, or even themselves because they think it's fun, what is sort of the starter kit? What's the minimum amount you think they should get to kick them off with it, to see if it's sort of for them?
I suppose it depends. I think the ruler is a key thing. If you are in the kind of lower school, and that, writing the date is a feature every single day, because, and if you're going to use the ruler, you usually start writing with pencils. So, the kind of, the pencils cover three different things, basically. That there's tricky words. So the words that you're supposed to just remember just by seeing them. So they're on the green pencil. We've also got a range of pencils which actually help expand your vocabulary. So, which are probably, I suppose, maybe slightly older, but, if your teacher says to you, oh, can you think of a better word than said? Then it says said at the top, and there are suggestions as to what else you could use.
Oh, almost like a thesaurus, but on a pencil.
Yes. The vocabulary pencils. And, there's nice, all those kind of words. And then what's the better version? So there's also grammar pencils.
Okay.
Children are asked now, very much part of the curriculum is to be quite detailed on your knowledge of grammar. And, those words, the labels that we give, like verb and noun, they are, very hard to remember what they relate to for people who are not dyslexic, actually, as well as dyslexic children. They've both got 4 letters. They don't sound like anything else. They don't give you any hint to what they represent. You learn them only in this context. So it's like, is the verb the thing and the noun is the doing word? People get them confused for a long time, and you're asked from quite early on to be able to spot the noun in the phrase, write the noun phrase, is the verb in the past tense. It's much earlier than it ever used to be, all of this specific grammatical knowledge. And a dyslexic child could easily find the answer if they knew which one they were actually looking for. Yeah. So, we have, I think that I'm very proud of the box that has the mixture in it. It has one of every pencil. So by that, you would get a few synonyms for the high frequency words. You'd get the first set of tricky ones. And then you've got verbs, adverbs, nouns, adjectives. And, it's a real good, I think that's the best starter box myself. But I guess it depends what you're after, really, what your particular area is.
And are you thinking of where are you thinking of expanding this to? How are you, I almost amusedly thought, oh, I wonder what an adult version of this look like and how much fun you could have with doing stuff you can't do for children.
Yeah, it'd have to be like a laptop cover or the back of your phone or something like that. Yeah,
look more like a Parker pen rather than a pencil or something. But having something adult based on it rather than children based could have lots of fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's, never-ending desire for stationery in young people, in my opinion. They absolutely love all of their bits and pieces. And, of course, they're relatively cheap, which is really lovely for the parents. So, we have lots of ideas about where to go next, but probably should work on them a bit more.
I mean, there's potential to use the artwork we've got on a whole multitude of things, actually.
Yeah.
The idea of putting something in numerous places just so that it helps you remember it could be expanded into. I mean, we talked about it. We haven't done it because basically we would need to reach a bigger audience before we do anything like that.
Yeah.
But, we could put it on furnishings, kids' furnishings. You could put it on, on their curtains, on their duvet covers, on their, because they're kind of fun little characters,
Yeah.
Or, we could create card games using the homophone pairs game. There's you could play with it in that sense. We've talked about pencil cases, definitely posters. It's quite easy to extend it really, but we do need to reach more people before we do that, because we've already got an amount of stuff. And as Sally says, when people know about it, they love it. But it's just about, we're a tiny company. It's just about trying to grow an audience. And if people like it, which they do seem to, then, it encourages us to move forward with it, really.
How are you trying to get it into schools? Are you just basically going around with it and on a show and tell and sort of assembly all the time? Or what's your sort of strategies for getting it far and wide?
Well, it's been interesting because we only started in lockdown. So there were no schools. And,
yes, of course. Yeah.
And what we started with was, of course, people suddenly found themselves at home with their kids, and we produced a lot of free resources that could be downloaded to kind of give a structure.
Yeah. No, we do, but I guess the thing that we should do more of is approach Senkos, because they're the ones that see the real value of it. I think normal teachers just think, oh, that's really nice, but, it's just more pencils. We've got pencils of all shapes and sizes and everything. But Senkos go, oh, I see. And it's that we think 10% of the population are dyslexic. I think it's more, but maybe that's just because of the world I live in. Everybody I meet seems to be dyslexic. But, it's for a particular sort of child that they will be helped by it. But obviously, the grammar ones help everybody, who's just not quite reached that stage. And not, the honest truth is that lots of people have a delay as well with spelling because it is so weird. So you may be quite, and it's not that common, but you might be quite a funky speller until you're about 8 or 9, and then it all just clicks. That does happen, and they're not dyslexic at all, but they looked like they were going to be. Or children who are learning English as a foreign language or as a second language or a third language, it's just about support. We should be doing more about schools. We're both quite busy. So, we do what we can.
We have recently given it to some local schools, actually, with, giving them free stuff, just hoping, to get some feedback from them. But that's a sort of ongoing situation, actually.
It's parents of dyslexic children who are absolutely looking for something and see immediately, when they've tried to teach their child the difference between does and knows for, that week's spellings, and just realized it doesn't make any sense. How am I going to teach this? What's going, this is going to, I don't know why children have to get marks for their spellings, actually. They're so fixated with, I got 4 out of 10, or so-and-so got 10 out of 10. It's such a terrible sort of precedent to set, that everybody knows and is judged on that, because probably the child who got 4 out of 10 put so much more effort in.
I know. Really, that's the thing for me. It's the self-esteem. And if the self-esteem is damaged when you're young, it's just, school is like a survival course, isn't it? For kids with dyslexia. To try and get through and not be damaged is such a feat. And, all of my children have left school now. One's at university, but I'm so glad. It was like, what an endurance test that was. Parents have to fight their corner all the way. It is a mission, isn't it? And just to try and protect some of that self-esteem, just so that you feel a little bit supported.
It's hard work being the parent of dyslexic children, and I think unless you're in that club, you don't get that. And maybe, you asked at the beginning how we became friends. You're in that club and you sort of know. You've had those moments. I've been asked for a child to have to leave his school. That was devastating. With various, the endless disappointments in this system, but your faith in your child that they are wonderful and have so much to offer. And actually, as Maggie's children are a bit older and have gone on to do amazingly well. But school making you feel like what is going to happen because they're not hitting these marks. I would really like all parents of dyslexic children to be able to put school in some sort of perspective and look at the future, but it's very hard when you're in it. It's really
hard
tough
when you're in it, which is also why, like I said earlier, I think that sort of superpower kind of message has a place, but it is a kind of a glossing over at the same time of how kids are actually experiencing things right now. It doesn't feel like a superpower when you are, struggling. It doesn't feel like that.
No.
So although it's aspirational and great to hear of all these people that do great things, the reality day to day can be really quite hard.
Yes, I never use that. I absolutely agree with you. I always say, chances are it's going to be really hard work until you get to GCSEs, and then you can choose your A-level subjects that are more suited to the way your brain works. And if you prepare yourself that it's going to be quite challenging, you probably get told around the age of 7 or 8, something like that. And then until the age of 16, you've probably got 8 quite demanding years. And if you don't, great, that's wonderful. But if you're prepared, I think it is better than giving this false hope, because it's treating dyslexic people as if they're stupid. They know. What are you talking about? My superpower? I don't like it at all.
It's an interesting, and I've had a few conversations with people on the superpower thing, and it's it's tricky because what am I, 30? Well, coming up 38 in a month. So yes, I can step into that, and I've got a job and a creative occupation that keeps me using that, and I'm like, oh yes, and with guests of this podcast, you pull things out that is their dyslexic strength. I think is probably a nice way of putting it. Like the dyslexic strength comes out, and there's a concept. I wish I could attribute this to the person I've heard it from, but I've forgotten. Shadow of the strength, where you are really good at one thing, but that casts a shadow, which is kind of the things that you either overdo the strength or you're not as good at something else. It's kind of all that balance in the world. And I do. If I had to tell the 10-year-old me that they had a superpower, he wouldn't have found that very helpful at all. But I don't know, really. You obviously deal with children more than I do, and clearly you think it's slightly off.
I think largely it's disingenuous. They don't feel like they have one, and so you keep telling them you have this superpower. I think puts you at a disconnect. I think you have to be very, very honest. Having said that, I think there are some great advantages to being dyslexic, which when you finish with your GCSEs with a lot of subjects that you perhaps are not suited to, or when you leave school altogether, then, I do think there are phenomenal advantages to being dyslexic, not least because you've worked for the last 8 years harder than anybody else and have worked out how you learn, how your brain works, how to communicate, your EQ as well as your IQ. And as we know, there is an enormous amount of talent in the creative industries, in anything with 3D. There's a lot of advantages to being dyslexic. But I think up until GCSE, it's not necessarily an easy ride.
It is. It's tricky. I mean, maybe if it is a superpower and it's like Superman, then until the end of your GCSEs, you're on Krypton, where everybody's the same. And it's only
that's the way to do it.
You get got onto Earth after GCSEs. You're like, wow, hang on, what the hell's gone on here? I think that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to start rounding out the podcast now. I have some 3 rapid fire questions I ask every guest at the end of the podcast. Now, there's 2 of you, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to work, but I'm going to do it anyway. So they're rapid fire from me. They don't need quick answers from you, though. So let's start with question number 1, and I'm going to get Maggie to answer this first, and then Sally can jump in. So question number 1 is, what prejudice have you had about dyslexia that's been proven wrong?
Prejudice that I've had about dyslexia?
Yes.
Oh, prejudice I've had about dyslexia. Oh, all I can think actually is that when I was told my child was dyslexic, it was given to me as a very negative thing. And I went to a bookshop trying to find out something about it. And I looked at all these books and they all seemed to be prejudiced, apart from one, which was called The Gift of Dyslexia. And that was the book that I bought.
By Ronald Davis.
Probably.
Yes.
That was, I don't know if that's the answer to the question, but I felt there were a lot of prejudice. And this was the thing that I was trying to avoid it. I was trying to avoid the prejudice. I was looking for the positive, and I went for the gift of dyslexia.
Yeah, good. And Sally?
I think that I had in my mind that dyslexia was a problem with spelling, but also and primarily with reading. And I think actually a lot of dyslexics, the vast majority of dyslexics, with repeated reading actually catch up with reading rather quickly. Whereas spelling can be a lifelong nightmare. I think dyslexics can actually learn how to read as fluently and accurately as their non-dyslexic peers quite quickly. 2 years worth of quite concentrated reading. And actually that's so much more important, because if you can't read, the curriculum really does close down. Whereas if you can't spell, and you can either find a technique for spelling, or you can get your head around the fact that you just don't care about your spelling, then you can just embrace any subject regardless. So I thought reading was going to be equally as difficult, if not more, than spelling, and I don't think that's the case.
Yes, because reading allows you to acquire a lot of knowledge.
Yes, I think actually in that context, then I probably never thought that my son would go on to study history, degree in history, which was an intense amount of reading, an intense amount of writing, and come out with a first.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Never in 1,000 years would I have thought that as we battled through primary school.
Yes, that's got to feel really rewarding when you're still at graduation.
And actually, you got my juices going now, but I remember thinking, we are not going to make it through school. I mean, it was so brutal in those early years, and it was like, I remember at one point I had to get my mum to go and pick my son up from school, because every day the teacher would say, "We've learned absolutely nothing today. He hasn't paid attention for one single minute."
Oh God,
and I just couldn't listen to it. This is like the little person that you love more than anything on the planet. And you've got somebody just dishing out this negativity on a daily basis in front of and overheard by all the other mothers of all the other children. I couldn't do it. It was reduced me to tears every day. So my mum used to go and pick him up, because I couldn't listen to that.
Yeah. Yes.
And of course it was nonsense. So
yes. But that's not fun, and I hadn't really thought of it from the.
No.
Well, I had thought, I kind of know it from my mum's point of view, but I hadn't put that much thought into it until you'd mentioned that.
Ask your mum. I bet she had a real, she was worried about you a lot, I bet.
That or my younger brother, who was doing other things. Okay, so my second rapid fire question, and I think I'm going to let Sally answer this first, is if an alien come down and landed and you had to describe dyslexia to them, how would you do it?
Oh, I'd be quite boring, I'm afraid. And I'd just say, I'd say it was a problem matching how words sound to how you have to spell them, and with an associated problem with organising in the early years. I'm sorry, that's sort of quite a traditional definition, but I think it does. That's what comes into my mind.
Cool. Maggie?
I would say to the aliens that there are different ways of learning, and that our education system is very geared towards one way of learning. But there are lots of people that like to learn in different ways, and they like to learn by seeing and hearing and feeling and touching. And unfortunately, not all schools do that. So therefore, some children find it difficult.
Yes. Okay, and the very last question of this podcast, and you're not allowed to answer with by handy spelling, but seeing as this is the Dyslexia Life Hacks show, what is your favourite Dyslexia Life Hack?
I like I like the idea that if you're very forgetful, which my boys are, there's something you have to remember for the following morning is that you write it down, you stick it in your shoe.
That when you
put it in your shoe the night before. So it means that you can't leave the house without you put on your shoe and you see it in there. You go, oh, I've got to do the thing. I've got to print the thing or get that thing, or you see.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, because I can't trust the morning me, so I have everything prepped.
Exactly. So it's to just give yourself a reminder, put it in a place where you can't, ignore it, basically. So if it's in your shoe, then you're walking out the door. Unless you're the kind of person who forgets your shoes, then
yeah.
I've got hope for you then.
I walked around for 3 hours and thinks, damn, these shoes are uncomfortable.
Yes, exactly. I've got something in my shoe.
Yes.
I think that for me, it would have to be audiobooks or reading to your child. I know that's quite traditional, but the fact that you can have a love of and an understanding of literature, words, expression, communication, creative writing. I think when you feel strong in that area, if you're the child, I teach a girl who writes the most remarkable stories, not a single word, with the exception of A, is spelled correctly, but they are hands down the most creative stories that anybody I teach writes. And she knows it. She knows, and so it has actually made the fact that her spelling is weak, she doesn't really care, because she knows that she's using all this wonderful imagery and her setting and her characters and her vocabulary. And that comes from reading. That comes from either somebody reading to you, or I think, let Stephen Fry do it. But, getting Audible or tapes, lots of people are getting rid of their CDs in the charity shops. Really, you can pick up loads. The more you become an expert in language, the spelling is the least important part of language. So, feed comprehension, feed creativity, feed imagination and expression. And then actually, if somebody has to say you've missed an E off here or there's a silent letter in there, doesn't matter. Whereas other people can't come up with that amazing simile because they're just not quite as exposed to language. So I think the whole turning what's important about literacy on its head is quite important.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to come on the show. And where can people find Handy Spelling or get hold of you to find out more?
Well, we have a website. It's www.handyspelling.com. And you'll find all the stuff we talked about is there, and lots of free stuff to download. And we're on Instagram.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're on Instagram. Yeah.
Just Instagram, or are you on Facebook and everywhere else too?
We're on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, then
Instagram is the active account. Yeah.
Okay, and I will link to them in the show notes, so you can find it there. And I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on, and I want to thank everybody else for taking the time to listen. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye for now.